All right. Yeah. Hi guys. I'm here with a writer that used to be in charge of game balance. What's your official title, Riot? Before?
So, if you want to let me introduce, I can,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Introduce yourself.
uh okay. My name is Tim. I'm a game designer at Riot. I used to work on League of Legends. I did a lot of league balance there. And then since about a year and a half ago, I moved to TFT. And so right now I do balance work on the finalization pod. And what my team does is we do a lot of problem solving and design and some balancing before the set ships. So I'm not on the live balance part right now, but our team works a lot with that team.
Okay.
And then like the clarity there is that I'll probably mention it later on, but again, like I don't represent the balance team. I work closely with them, but everything I say is not exactly what like they're going to do or like I don't speak for that team.
Okay. And just kind of like let people a little insight. The main reason I'm doing this video is I always get people that are asking me like, what do you think should change in the game or whatever? Like, what do you think about this? And they're always like trying to tinker with the game from like a viewer perspective. And I
Hmm.
kind of thought like, okay, what if I did a patch by myself, and then I kind of get a writer's perspective on like what are the levers that they think, what are they thinking about like when they see something being too strong or too weak. It can't just be like, hey, we're gonna turn this number down, or we're gonna turn this number. Like, there's so many other little variables to think about. So we're just gonna like run through some of these patch changes. TLDR, I made this patch maybe like a week ago, and I've been playing on the patch a little bit longer. So I feel like some of these I might not like fully still agree with, but these are the changes I made like after I played on the patch for maybe like 2 or 3 days. So I think the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about some traits. Three dragon. I basically think three dragon is completely useless on anything besides Namzi. And I mean, Smolder, all it really does is give you like a little mini heal. And I think if you're being focused, you're probably just dead anyways. So I think I would like for it to not really do like just the heal. I want it to be like more of like a debuffing thing to stick with like the theme of Dragon, where Smolder heals and gains a stacking physical damage burn that's gonna go on him every single time he procs his ultimate. Not just like the hits, but like his ultimate itself. So it can kind of give you like that like burning thematic kind of change. I wasn't really sure what the damage numbers on it should be. I just put it at 20.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So a couple things just to start off. It's like at the time we're filming this, um, our team works decently far in advance. So I actually know what's in patch 14.18. I think Mort's even talked about it on his socials. So I'm coming in kind of with a little bit of bias on like, oh, I know what our team thinks and what our team's kind of locked in 14.18. For Dragon, I think 14.18 also is the big patch. There's a lot of big champion and trait reworks in it. So not all of those are going to be like talked about here. So keep that in mind. But for three dragon, um, yeah, I think our team definitely agrees that it's not really like that cool or that useful on a lot of the champions besides Nomzi. I think Nomzi, if you guys remember Exiles from set four, it's kind of supposed to be like that, where the most excitement is supposed to be on the one and the two costs. And I think the 3-1 for Smolder is also like just supposed to be more on the utility side. So I think it's good that we kept it around there. Um, So I think this general direction would work pretty well. I think making Smolder the general goal of like I want Dragon to feel cooler when I upgrade it because it's hard is something that we really wanted to do. I think this one would work fine. Like I think you kept the heal, which is like, hey, he stops killing himself as often, so it's kind of useful. And then just a small little bonus on top. I think for Dragon as well that I think it's coming up in 14.18. That's not mentioned here. Is that I think Smolder and Shyvana's can also kind of use a rework slash buff to make them a little bit more exciting as well. So I think the general direction was good. We could probably do more on the other two dragons as well.
Okay. So you're just like mainly trying to stick with your original goals when you created the trade in the first place. That's like the main thing you're thinking about, right?
Yeah, and it's like Smolder, this doesn't change the goals. He does the same thing, probably a little bit more useful.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So next one, I think is a gripe a lot of people have is 10 portal. So basically, if you get Wandering Trainer or if it's the Trainer Golem,
Mhm.
you can basically hit 10 portal at level 9 super easily if you get a spat, which is honestly not that hard to do. and there's very few things that beat 10 Portal outside of make like 3-star 4 or 5 costs or 10 Eldritch, which are astronomically harder to hit. So
Mhm.
I think, it's cool if you can hit it, like, why not? But I don't think 10 Portal should be insta auto win the game, and I think it should be beatable. So I did think the route is to like tone down the numbers. Uh, and instead of making it just like, okay, this is harder to hit, I just want it to be like, I don't want to feel like instantly defeated when I see somebody with it on the board. That's like my goals with the number nerfs.
Yeah. No, I think you identified it pretty well. Yeah, like I'm not gonna debate. We should, and I think there's 10 Portal nerfs in 14-18, and you took it in the right direction. Like, yeah, I think 10 Portal is a lot easier to hit than its power level indicates. But I think if we wanted to change how hard it is to hit, that opens up a lot of other systems that need changing. Like, oh, there's a lot of spats in charms. There's a lot of portals that give you extra, ways to hit this without needing level 10. And there's a bunch of augments. But I think if we want to address that, that's a whole nother question. So
That's way
this
harder
one
to
is a pretty
balance.
isolated change. North 10 portal. Yep, that's a good one.
Okay. This is another one. 5 and 7 Frost. Honestly, I don't know why I even put this in here because it's still. I feel like you play Frost, it's like, all right, I got third or fourth place. I don't feel like it ever wins the game, and I don't really think.
Mhm.
I'm okay. Plus 10 ADAP. Honestly don't know why I put this changer because like I don't feel like what you call it. I think my problem with Frost is it feels really good early mid game and then super late game it just feels not very strong. So I think I would have changed these balance changes to more target like late game Frost. And I'm not really sure how to target that outside of like tweaking Olaf himself. Because there's you run so many trash units to like run 7 Frost. Like there's
Mhm.
a lot of dumpster tier units in there, and yeah, I think either like those would have to be addressed, or like something as like the whole of Frost has to be addressed, or just boost the whole trade up itself. And I wasn't really sure like which lever to go after. I kind of just like blanketed it with like a raw damage boost.
Yeah, so I think this one is kind of a great example of why live balance is really hard. And so I'm going to give my view on like what the problem is. I think it's up to the live team is more Chalky and Aniko right now, so they're the ones who are executing it. But this is why like trade balance is really hard. I think Mort's harped on it a lot. One of the biggest issues with Frost, and as you noted, that's why it falls off, is that Frost 5, 7, and even 9, a lot of the power is in like killing that first unit. And if you don't kill that first unit fast enough, your trade is just like half useless.
Yeah.
Um, and like you kind of noted the levers. I personally don't know which one is the best. I think the live team is addressing this in some way. But like if you buff Olaf, the consequences of buffing Olaf is that hey, like it helps 5 and 7 Frost, but it also helps comps that just have Frost as a 3-piece or don't even use Frost for Olaf. So is that the direction we want? If we buff the AD and AP here, then like is 5 too good? Is 7 too good? I think buffing the trait seems like a reasonable path. But ultimately, in like a perfect world where we had more time, Frost wouldn't be as reliant on like killing that first unit to get like some value. So,
Okay. Makes
but
sense.
I think like if we were to do this, I don't personally know if 5 and 7 Frost need a strict buff with a lot of things changing 14-18, but I think it's a reasonable thing to bring up.
I think it's on the fence. Yeah. Okay. Next one.
Yeah.
Arcane damage nerf to plus damage from spats. Honestly, actually, I should have taken this one out because I played more with it, and I don't really feel like Arcane's even that good anymore, to be honest. So we can just skip over this one. Next one is Encanter 2. I said now gives an additional 10 flat AP to start. I think all the Encanter units besides Karma are just terrible. I mean, Syndra got gutted because, for her sins.
Yeah.
And Ziggs is like an okay opener, but it's like I don't really like playing him as an opener that much. Like I feel like Encanter 2 needs to be addressed to like make the units better for being transition, like in the early game. And I think
Mhm.
Karma, like, I don't even think her strength is the fact that she's an Encanter. I think the strength is that she gets, Chrono for free, and she just, like, slots
Yeah.
well into, like, this Preserver build. So just, like, kind of targeting, making the whole Encanter trait better overall.
Mhm. I think the live team is really good at identifying like the bigger problems. I think in Cantor, like as you noted, like the units outside Karma are just horrible. I think Ziggs is not that bad after the last buff.
He's like, okay.
Uh, yeah, I think this is a decent way to be like, hey, the trade is bad, let's buff it. But I think like the next level here, which is not always possible, right? Sometimes you have resources, sometimes you don't. But it is true that I think the trade itself is weak when you play the units, not Karma. But I also think like we can dig deeper and be like, why do Syndra and um, Cassio and Ziggs last patch like feel really, really bad to play? I think initial flat AP helps a lot. But I think their spells also have a bit of problems. I think in 14-18, like I think more sort of revealed Cassio's getting reworked and stuff like that. I think that's another option of like, hey, how do we balance how good the champion is outside the trait versus how good the champion is with the trait? And sometimes the champion's not good enough, sometimes the trait's not good enough. Um, and it's just kind of identifying which one is the better bang for your buck.
Yeah, so it's like there's another lever you can use and like another change you can look at. Okay,
Yeah.
next one is Eldritch. I think outside of school mascot or like somehow by some miracle getting 10 mascot, I feel like Eldritch really falls off super fast. I think 5 and 7 falls off like really really fast, and like I think that if you get 7 Eldritch in stage 4, you should feel comfortable and happy, and it doesn't feel like that right now. So I kind of went with more like the star levels of each of the your guys getting upgraded. It buffs the mascot overall, so like maybe this could open up like some reroll builds or something like that too. But yeah, instead of it just being some like flat boost or whatever, I just put a bunch of level 1 Eldritch units on the board.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty valid route. I think Eldritch is a little weak, and obviously, if you want to buff Eldritch, you should buff the bear to be cool. So I think that's fairly like that's a fair change.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that one's pretty
Pure
straightforward.
augment.
Yeah, hero. This is like people love hero augments. So I mean, I feel like hero augments are a lot of contention because I feel like the fantasy, especially for the casual player, like you hit it, you're like, oh yeah, Spider Queen. I pressed the D key, you know. Like I feel like, especially for the casual audience, they like it a lot. But I think at high level play, it can be really oppressive, especially things like Spider Queen, where if they hit the Elise in stage 3, like they're just win streaking and probably running the game over. So I just, especially since you guys buffed all the shapeshifters on this patch, I think that's like
Yep.
the Riot special where they just buff everything all at once on one patch, and I think maybe it's just a little bit too much, too fast. So just a small nerf to the Spider Queen damage that she's doing, and yeah.
I think the problem with hero augments. Also, first of all, like I think the team and myself like definitely agree they're over. Um, they're both too consistent and too powerful. So even if people like them, it doesn't really matter when you hit. You're going to hit eventually, and then once you hit, you can top four, which is just like not really the tension we want in TFT. So I think for all three of these, they're too strong. I think nerfs are fair, and these are the correct levers. Like they just frankly stabilize too easily, not for the exact magnitude of the numbers. I think the team does a lot of like sims that has a bunch of data that they put into the like how big or small they do their nerfs. I'm not going to talk too much about the exact numbers because those can always be changed with testing, and then yeah, they go live.
Okay, these are just eyeball numbers. Like I don't really know what the right numbers are. So
Exactly right.
okay, next one is Cauterize. I don't know if you know what this augment is. Like I don't think many people
Yeah,
do.
no,
Okay, but it's basically like you need to kill units with your pyro guys to get this stacking buff, and none of the pyro units are good early. So like Akali is terrible early game, and Shen is not killing anybody. So not only you're not stacking this early game, but the actual damage it gives you is not really that great. So there's like a whole bunch of issues with this augment. And it might just need to be like completely taken out or like reworked altogether.
yeah.
Yeah, and I basically like kind of gave it the same smaller treatment where it gives you a stacking burn that is based on the amount of cinders you do, like a the kind of thing stick with the theme of like pyro and all that kind of stuff. So
No, I think you called out the big problem with the augment and kind of the trait is that hey, it's an early game stacking trait, and the units in Pyro aren't good at getting kills and stacking it that well. So like, what's the point? Um, I think a good step in balance is like first like, hey, if it's really really bad, let's try to make it good with what we have. And so I'd probably take the first step of just buffing it and seeing what happens because it's not super insane at either stage right now. It's like probably okay on 3-2. Um, but I think if we had like infinite time resources, I think, yeah, like either disabling it if it's still failing after we buff it, or doing a rework where you get some upfront power to help you kill something is a pretty good shape for an augment.
Yeah, I think it's like just it just needs to be tweaked. Like the design of it needs to be tweaked. That is my big thing because it
Yeah.
doesn't line up with the units. Okay, the next one is What the Forge. I kind of just so the problem with What the Forge to me is that there's so many items that are just completely untakeable because of the massive uh, item change they did in the last set. You have things like Vamp
Mhm.
Scepter and whatnot. Like these items are just completely useless if you get them. So I think I boosted the health a little bit that it gives because I actually think that's a kind of a cool direction that they went with it. But now I feel like it should give you at least two Reforgers. So when you do get griefed, you can like kind of, you know, do something out of it or whatever. And I don't think that this makes it like overpowered and actually gives you like a little bit of control over like where your destiny is in the game.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track. I actually helped them do a bit of changes for this for 1418, so I don't know when this is coming out, but essentially like we're going along kind of with this direction because we think What the Forge is really cool. I think it's a fun augment, um, but we kind of want people to take more chances at seeing artifacts. So I think this is a really good start. I think at the end of the day, if like things like Vamp Scepter are just way too narrow and are just not really good on anything you want, we could think about just taking it out of the What the Forge pool. But I think things like this are definitely what we want to try first because I don't want to disable What the Forge unless it's just like unsavable, which it's not. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, I don't think it's unsavable. It's just some items are just way too narrow on the champions that we used.
Yeah.
Okay, next one is anger issues. I think this augment is really tough because your frontline items are just horrendous. So I kind of made it to. I mean, this might be like way too much work for the devs and all that, but I kind of made it to where if you put it on frontliners, instead it gives you
Mm.
a stacking MR and armor instead of a stacking damage. So you kind of stick with
Yeah.
that same power fantasy, where you could just build a tank with a bunch of rage blades and then just be ramping it up or whatever. And maybe that'd be too overpowered on things like multi strikers or whatever. But I'm sure it'd be a balancing nightmare and something would be broken. But maybe just make it a little bit more cool and maybe easier to balance in that regard.
Yeah. So I can get a lot of context on this one. So I made this augment and we wanted to do something like this. And there were a couple flaws with it. I think it's like a much cooler fantasy and a much more like usable fantasy. But one of the actual first big blocker is it's really hard to explain what this is in the augment tooltip because it's just way too much text and we have a text limit on like
Yeah, it's more
what's
text
on
here
the card
now.
and yeah, exactly. So we tried to like make the best design with the least number of words that could be understandable because it's already a ton. But I actually think something like this is pretty cool. If we could actually like communicate it well, I think like hero augment but for your item is like a very cool space. Um, the stacking like armor and MR we were also really worried about because just like as a principle in TFT, like infinitely ramping defenses ends up being like pretty toxic for game health.
Oh yeah.
Um, because like the more if you get tankier and tankier over time, then you kind of know what the fight's going to be like in the first like 5 seconds and 10 seconds. Like if I didn't kill the multi striker or stacking unit in the first like rotation of spells, I'm never going to kill them again because they're just getting more and more tanky and it becomes like really really boring to watch. That's just something to watch out for. So that's kind of why it's flat. Um, but I think there's just like there's the levers there that can make it okay, but it's kind of meant to be one of those augments that's relatively narrow, kind of fun once in a while, but like shouldn't be default good.
Okay, makes sense. And the wording is something I didn't think about either, where it's like I gotta read this whole tooltip or whatever. So it's way too long.
Yeah.
Okay, next one. I think just pumping up. All of them are kind of just underperforming, so maybe just just boost the numbers up even more. I don't really know how else to tweak that one. Yeah, the more
Yeah,
ramping attack
this one
speed.
I think the question here is like it's pretty simple, but then we should ask ourselves, hey, are these like the baseline level of combat power we want, and then everything else is just like power crept? And so like maybe the other combat augments are just too good. So that's just the question to ask when we just want to keep buffing stuff up.
Yeah,
Oh well.
which I don't really know if I feel like because I feel like a lot of the combat augments are pretty bad on this set. So yeah, like and Blossoming Lotus is another example of that where I just think that this it just takes too long to get online or maybe fights are too fast. And I just wanted to like went for boosting the 1 and 2 crit up or whatever that you're ramping with.
Yeah. Threes are crowd, I think can use a buff.
Oh wait,
But Blossoming
I
Lotus, yeah.
oh, I skipped threes of crowd whoops,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, but that one's pretty simple. Like I think it's weak. It could use a buff. Yeah. Blossoming Lotus. I think this is kind of a shape thing. Players like at the end of the day like are not excited, nor is it that good because like the beginning of combat is so valuable. I think buffing it is a fair thing to do. I think if we had, if we wanted to, again, like one of the problems here for our team is that I think Mort's talked about it. We have to lock the tooltip changes for the patch like a week and a half to 2 weeks before the patch comes out. So we have to be like very, very ahead if we want to do any tooltip changes. But I think like maybe a better version of this augment is like it starts with some crit chance and then grows, so you're not just like completely reliant on scaling.
Like a Jewel
Um,
Lotus kind of deal or whatever. Or like, I mean, it already gets
yeah,
crit, yeah.
exactly. It's like, oh, I ramp later. But I think like if it's weak, yeah, it could definitely just use this lever, buff it up.
Okay. Next one. I mean, I'm pretty much going down all the combat augments here because I feel like a lot of them are underpowered.
Yeah.
Avenge the Fallen. I mean, just a 5% boost across the board. I still think even with 5% boost, it might not be enough. Just because I mean, same thing like we talked about. Like the beginning of the fight is very important, and like if half your units are dead, like what does that even do at that point? So
Yep, I think this is fair to buff. I think a big like goal for the team on 14-18 was that there's a lot of still very, very bad augments and a couple that are just auto win. And so bringing that a lot closer is just better.
yeah, and combat bandages. I'm pretty sure this is still bugged. I could be wrong though. And also, I'd like the heal to ignore anti-heal because I don't even think the heal's even that much. Uh,
Mhm.
so it's like I don't think that'd be out of line, but it just like or it could be like a cleanse or something. I just feel like the heal is like not really. Everybody has anti-heal late game, or like everyone. So you're just basically
Yeah.
getting half an augment
So
with this.
I'd rather, well, one, yeah, I think we're bug fixing it next patch. So that's probably the biggest thing is that it'll actually work after stage 4, which was the bug. But I think mechanics like ignoring anti-heal is something we don't want to open the Pandora's box on because like then we're just kind of like power creeping like
Oh yeah,
counterplay and gameplay. If we're saying, and I think it varies a lot with skill level. If we're saying anti-heal is the biggest thing for this, then we can buff up the later levels now that it actually works. But I think we'll just bug fix it and hopefully, I mean, that should make it stronger. I mean, it works for
yeah.
half the game.
Hopefully half
So,
that game. Yeah. Okay, then we're talking about unit changes here. So Syndra, I mean, she got gutted a couple patches ago. I think basically, her whole fantasy is that she can stack her thing up or whatever. So I would like the mana lock to be reduced by 30%. I don't know if that's like that's just a weird number I came up with, and I think it kind of sticks with her like power fantasy. But I think it got really nerfed in patch before because she was like way overpowered. So
yeah, I think you were right on the fact that like we want her scaling and casting to be her fantasy. I'm not sure on if we want to do the mana lockout, because I think you guys realized pretty quickly that when mages don't have a long mana lockout, they kind of build a lot of attack speed. And we generally don't like mages doing that because we want them to like want to build casting and like mana generation and damage items. And AS is like, yes, it's a mana generation item, but it's like when AS is good as mana generation and damage, it becomes really, really like messed up for their build. I think if we wanted Syndra to be better, I think the team would probably look at like buffing her damage just so like when she scales up, each like echo does a lot more damage. Or if it's like now she stacks like at half the rate, I would look at like the stack rate. But I think right now her cast time is pretty close to healthy on what her builds are. It's like probably double mana, but not double Rage Blade.
okay.
I think that's what we wanted to avoid. So
Okay, makes sense. And then Nico, I think even after the buffs to her, she still feels so squishy, and especially if you're playing any build where she's like you're 3-starring her or making compared to Swain, I feel like she's so squishy. So I just decided. I mean, this is a weird number. Gain flat 15% damage reduction on cast. That might be too much for like shapeshifters, but I just think anything to increase her survivability would be great. I don't know if she's meant to be more like a shielding damage person, but she's just way outclassed by Swain.
do you think buffing the heal? Why wouldn't you want to buff that?
Because everybody has anti-heal.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what the team feels about this one. I don't actually know Nico's exact power state. I think if we were to buff her, we would start with the heal or her base stats to make it better. Like she'd be tankier with shapeshifter. I think adding like another axis of like multiplicative like defenses is something we're a little worried about because it's like we since we shipped her already, we need to like have a really good reason why we need to add a mechanic to her. And I think she's functionally like fine. maybe
Oh,
just a little
so you
weak.
guys don't like changing mechanics after you've already shipped the champion. That's like something you guys are resilient to.
Yeah, unless it's like a pretty, because there's a cost. So the more change there is, the more uncertainty there is. And since we've already shipped it, we want to be relatively confident. Or like the problem has to be big enough. And so here I would say like Nico's just not tanky enough. That's a valid problem. I don't think it's big enough that it necessarily needs a new mechanic like a damage reduction. If it was, then we could.
Okay.
But yeah.
All right. And you can just skip this karma buff. I don't even know why I have it on here. She's actually so fun.
Yeah, you want to buff Karma? Yeah, Karma's pretty good.
Yeah, okay, we'll just skip that one. I think Nasus change should be reverted from 14.17. I think he's horrible as a tank right now, even though all the shapeshifters got buffed. I mean, I feel like Swain is like actually tankier than Nasus at the time. So, and also I feel like him being weak makes Pyro weak as well because like, he was the main tank for that comp. So I don't know. I just think he just needs to be reverted. I don't think he was like overpowered in that set or patch anyways.
Mhm. I don't know what the team feels exactly. I think I'll just talk about reverts. I think if we missed, I think the team's very open to being like, hey, we missed, let's change it back. If there was like, oh, we misidentified the problem and he didn't actually need this. I think for 14-18, they might be going on the path of like he's fine, and they're gonna adjust like the Pyro Varus like link because Varus is getting some changes in 14-18.
Okay.
But like again, like if he's weak, I think that's fine to be like, yeah, if we didn't actually solve the problem, let's not create more problems.
Okay, and then Bio already got bug fixed. That was in the B
Yep.
patch. And then Smolder, I don't even know if this is a bug, but make him not run into team and kill himself. I don't know how to fix that.
So I wish we could fix this too. This is more of a design thing. This is, I think, harder on our end. I think if we could just snap our fingers and do this, we would. But I think like if we were to like rewind way into dev, it's like, does Smolder really? What does he get from moving around a lot? I think we need to justify that first, and if he actually needs to move, I wish we could fix this. I don't think it's getting. I think we're trying to improve it as much as we can, but I don't think it'll be like super solved. This is like a problem we created ourselves, and we should learn from it. Which is like it's not Singed or Nunu or Asol where they're actually like fine flying through the enemy team. I think if we want a backliner that only flies in the backline, it's kind of like why does he need to fly then? So
Yeah, that's true. And then Camille, I feel like I mean, 6 chrono doesn't even work. Apparently, it's like bugged or something. So maybe like I just don't see Camille. Like half the time when you're playing Callista, you just play your items on Fiora, and then it's hard to like transition from Fiora into Camille, and it just doesn't really feel like she has like an identity. Like I'm not really playing around Chrono. It's hard to like transition into her. So I just gave her like a small help of. So I don't think this is like the end all be all change for her, but she probably needs like something addressed like holistically or like how her comp fleshes out, or like when you would put her on the board and things like that.
yeah, I think going back to the Nico point, Camille I think is confusing as well, and I think Camille is like a type of level of a problem where the team would be more open to changing mechanics or adding mechanics. Probably not adding on Camille, she does too much. But like Camille has a lot of things that just don't make her feel good to play. Like she doesn't use any of her traits well. She's really inconsistent, and then she dashes around and she's buggy. Like I think there's a lot of things here that we could solve. I think a lot of them are really complex, so I don't know if we're gonna tackle them like ASAP. I think it takes a little bit of time for us to get it right. But yeah, I think if she's weak, a small numbers change is fine. But I think you noted that yeah, she needs a little bit more work for her to actually like feel fun and feel good as the 5 cost.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty much what I got for the patch. Do you have any like closing thoughts or anything that you'd want to change, or like any comments on like what I changed like over holistically or?
I mean, I think this is a pretty good rundown of like exact content. I think when we're also doing a patch, I think I can ask you this as well. It's like the first question is like, what do I think could be improved in the game, like as a system? So you focused on traits, champs, and a couple augments, but like holistically, like the game flow, I'm sure you have like some criticisms about that. So I include that as well. Um, so I think Mort revealed it today. Actually, it's like, hey, we're gonna buff 4 cost odds on 8, and so things like that are also part of the patch. And so if you had any like improvements or like suggestions there, you can I like we could have seen them in this rundown as well.
Yeah, I probably should have targeted systems and things and items. They can do systems, items, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, exactly. Because they're all open to change every single patch. Again, since they're system wide, there's like a higher level of like they need to be really good and really confident. But we're open to changing them whenever there's like area for improvement.
Okay. Well, I mean, I appreciate the time talking about all this, and I hope you give a lot of insight to the people at home that are, always like armchair analyzing, like right should do this, right should do like buff this, nerf that. Like some of the things you guys are thinking about, and I appreciate everything we talked about here.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to help out. Happy to field any questions. Mort's not the only one.
Yeah, you can be more junior. All right, man. Well, thanks for your
Yeah.
time, and I'll let you go. So I'm sure you're busy. All right, take care, man.
I go, yeah.